shop improvements. More wall control pegboards. These pegboards have already changed my life. The ones over here in the fab area, so useful. It makes storing things so much more convenient. Do you guys want to get some wall control pegboards for yourself? I'll have a link in the description down below. And then the other shop upgrade we have is over here. This right here is Rogue Fabrications tube notcher. And this is replacing my JD squared tube notcher. For one, it's got like a full 360 degrees range of motion, almost like 270. So you can notch a tube in pretty much any way. Plus, you can notch curves on this one, which was a huge problem with the other notcher. You could kind of try to notch a curve, but it didn't work very well. This one will be able to do curves. So, what are we doing today? Let me tell you. Well, the first thing that's exciting is that Matteo has run the calculations. He's done all the testing. He has found what we have to modify, where we have to move all the points in order to make the front suspension work in the rear of the Eclipse. Let's talk to him.
The first thing was to try to get the lower control arm back into its plane, leaving all the components as they are, so not requiring any modifications on the control arms or the knuckle. I tried to move things around, and basically I did what we have seen with the effects. The inclination in the longitudinal plane of the lower control arm was tilting the rear upwards, and now it's exactly the opposite, so it's tilting up. The cast angle is now much reduced, and then I just moved the inner toe link in a position that would reduce the bump steer, and having so that the toe remains more or less constant during extension. So during braking, the car doesn't toe out.
How did you actually go about kind of finding these new points? Was it just kind of trial and error, or?
It was a mix of a trial and error and some basic guidance. I knew that I wanted the instant center of rotation in front, so I started reducing the caster and then started to lift the front lower control arm point to check where the anti-lift braking was getting to. And also while doing so, I was checking the distance between the steering axis, even if not the steering axis for the rear, and the center contact patch of the tire to reduce the torque on the hub while cornering. It was very funny to try to find a solution to starting from the just the approach, because I am used to move points whenever I want, then build some sort of control arm and check if it clashes with something else. This was completely opposite. I had to maintain what we had and try to move it around just to have it do what I want. So
yeah, I didn't even really think about that. It makes it hard to move things around because they have to be in the same relation as each other, because otherwise it has to have a different control arm.
Yes. My girlfriend was quite upset because when I had the revelation of how to do it, and I left it there on the couch.
Oh, that's so funny. Before we start modifying the subframe, we gotta clean it, because I bought these parts from a guy in Las Vegas. They are super rust free and super awesome, but they're covered in like dirt and sand. So let's break out the power washer and give those parts a quick wash. all of our new old suspension parts for the front rear are all cleaned up. We got another set of control arms, another steering rack, which I'll probably replace with the front one because this one looks cleaner than the one that used to be in the front. New factory front brakes that we're gonna put on the rear, which is a pretty big upgrade from what I had on the rear. And then our subframe, which we have to go ahead and modify. The points that we have to modify on the subframe are the front lower control arm mount, the rear lower control arm mount, and the inner tie rod mount. So the front lower control arm mount, it's gotta go about 15 millimeters in towards the center of the car. The rear lower control arm mount has to go 8 millimeters out from the center of the car and 27 millimeters down, so farther down, and that will angle the control arm in and up, and that fixes the anti-effects. Now, in order to do this right, I have to make a jig for the subframe, because these numbers are small. I mean, 8 millimeters, that's very little, that's less than a centimeter, and it's important that it's as accurate as possible. And just cutting this thing up and then trying to move it freehand, it's not gonna be good. So I'm gonna make a jig that will mount this to, you know, a nice XYZ plane, kind of like what we did with the car. Then I'll measure all the points, then we'll cut out the subframe, start fabricating. So here's our subframe jig. It's kind of just like a mount to hold the subframe and allow us to measure the points from a fixed location. And the jig is level with the top of the subframe, which means it's level with the frame rails of the car, which means it's the same plane that the jig we made for the car is. So pretty much all the measurements, they're gonna be good. I'm gonna measure the points and then we can start cutting. Another exciting thing is we got some roll cage material on our big rack. The JMR guys came all the way down, or up, from South Atlanta to help deliver it. Thank you guys.
No problem.
And they're going to help on the Eclipse for a little bit. I'm gonna get to work on the subframe. They're going to get to work on prepping the chassis for the cage. Let's do it. Well, we got our subframe all cut up, the pieces of our subframe. Now, in order to make sure all the angles of everything are correct, we're gonna put the pieces onto the control arms. We'll get everything in the right place that way. So the outside of the subframe is welded up. Bear with me, it's, you know, it's not the prettiest thing yet, but I'm gonna make it look better. The next step is to flip it over and then weld the inside of the seams and brace the inside of the seams. The awesome thing about the way that I cut this subframe, you know, cutting the front mount and this entire rear mount together, was that I could keep the factory subframe brace right there, which connects the front and the rear, and it moved all of the mounts along with the brace. So each, you know, section of the subframe is gonna be mounted to the chassis that we build. So I'm not worried about the structural integrity of this thing at all. I mean, it's gonna be solid. But yeah, let's go and flip it over and weld those things up. The unfortunate thing is all this MIG welding is kind of destroying the floor. We do still have to make an inner tie rod mount, but that's not gonna happen for a bit. I'm really happy with the way the subframe came out. Kinda almost looks like the factory subframe. I grinded the welds on the outside down enough where they look better, but not enough to compromise anything. Now, it's time to start building our chassis. The first thing we're gonna do is mount this subframe here, which means the first thing we need to do, go ahead, put the car on the ground, level it out with the ground, and then weld on some plates to the frame and start bending some tubes. It's really unfortunate that the fabrication lift and the floor beneath the fabrication lift is the least level place in this entire shop. But I went ahead and made some shims, kind of like what we did for the scales, except this time for the jack stands. And I got it perfectly level. So satisfying. Took like 3 different tries, but it wasn't too bad. Driver side has 3 shims, back driver side has 4 shims, and the back passenger side has 2 shims. Front passenger side, no shims. So that goes to show that, you know, this corner, highest point, and right here, going to the drain, is the lowest point. Makes sense. Now the reason why we needed to do that is so when we're building the tubing, we can use levels to make sure it's all level with the car. Obviously, if the car wasn't level, and then we built all of our chassis to be level, it wouldn't match. You know, it wouldn't be level in the car. So now we can just build our tubing, check it with a level, and it will be all good. And so here's the moment. First things first, let's go ahead and make a plate and weld it to the frame. Oh no. Oh no. Man, nothing bugs me more than the fact that every single welding supply store, they're all closed on the weekends. And I swear, every time I run out of gas, it's on a weekend. Well guys, since I can't get any more work done, I'm gonna go ahead and end the video here. Now in the next video, I'm actually driving to Tennessee in my new car to pick up a new built long block for the Eclipse. So that's super exciting. After we do that, we'll get back to work on the cage. We'll mount the subframe, start doing the rest of the chassis stuff. Gotta get to work. Gotta start making some serious progress on this car. So we're definitely gonna do that. But yeah, if you want to see the next video where I show you guys my new car and drive to Tennessee to pick up the new motor, you can click up there to watch that right now. Hope you guys did enjoy this video though. Huge thank you again to Matteo for all the help with all the calculations and such. And also a huge thank you to the JMR guys for helping me get the roll cage material and do some, you know, stuff on the chassis. In case you forgot, if you guys want to enter to win this car, you can check out powerjdm.com. Every $1 you spend on merch or on car parts over at PowerJDM gives you 1 entry for your chance to win the car. Thank you guys all so much for the support. I'll see you in a few days. Peace out.
See, that is so confusing because I was almost positive that I read an enormous percentage, a very high percentage of the people that were new cases that were infected with COVID were vaccinated. They were increased, but again, the big surge itself, and particularly in